5 women ran from Elias Boone's mountain cabin before winter came, but the sixth one walked straight into the storm and refused to leave. What happens when 2 people the world calls too much finally find a place big enough to hold them both? This is the story of a mountain man carved by rejection, and a woman who'd spent her whole life apologizing for the space she took, until she stopped. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The last bride left on a Tuesday. Elias Boone stood on his porch and watched the wagon disappear down the mountain trail, dust rising behind it like smoke from a dying fire. He didn't wave, didn't call out, just stood there with his hands hanging at his sides, watching another woman choose anywhere but here. Rebecca was her name. Or maybe Rachel. He'd stopped keeping track after the third one. The sun was setting behind the ridge, turning the pine trees black against an orange sky. Beautiful, people always said about views like this. Breathtaking. Elias had heard those words from every woman who'd stepped onto this porch, right before they found reasons to leave. He went inside and closed the door. The cabin felt bigger in the silence. He'd built it that way on purpose. Rooms for children who never came, a kitchen meant for family meals that never happened, windows facing east to catch morning light that only ever illuminated empty chairs. 43 years old. That's what the mirror showed him when he bothered to look, which wasn't often. 6'4", 240 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, hands that could split logs or gentle a frightened horse with equal ease, face that looked like the mountain had carved it herself, all hard angles and weathered lines. Too big, the first bride had said, though she'd tried to couch it in gentler words. Too intimidating. That was bride number 2. Too different from what I expected, said the third, which was just another way of saying the same damn thing. 4 and 5 hadn't bothered with explanations. They'd taken one look at him standing in the doorway of the stagecoach station and invented emergencies back home. Family illness. Prior commitments. Changed minds. Rebecca, or Rachel, had lasted 4 days. That was actually a record. Elias moved through the cabin, lighting lamps he'd made himself from bent tin and candle wax. The furniture was rough but solid. Tables that wouldn't wobble. Chairs that could hold a man his size without creaking. Bed frame hewn from pine and joined with wooden pegs because iron cost money, and he'd learned to make do without. Everything in this place he'd built with his own hands. Everything except the emptiness. That had come on its own. He stood at the kitchen counter and ate cold venison and day-old bread, chewing methodically while darkness pressed against the windows. Somewhere an owl called. Wind moved through the pines with a sound like breathing. This was his life now. This had always been his life. The realization didn't hurt anymore. That was something, he supposed. He'd come to this mountain 6 years ago with nothing but a wagon full of tools and a stubborn belief that a man could make something of himself if he just worked hard enough. Built the cabin over 2 hard seasons, cutting timber and hauling stone until his hands bled and his back screamed. Cleared fields. Dug a well that hit water on the 3rd try. Planted crops that actually grew in the rocky soil. Made a place worthy of a family. Except the family part never happened. Oh, he'd tried. Sent letters to matrimonial agencies back east. Wrote honest descriptions of himself in this place. The isolation, the work, the harsh winters. Figured honesty was better than pretty lies. 5 women had read those letters and decided to take a chance. 5 women had arrived, taken one look at the reality, and found reasons to leave. Elias finished his meager dinner and washed his plate in the basin, scrubbing it clean with sand and cold water. The routine of it was comforting in its way. This, at least, he could control. Outside, the temperature was dropping. He could feel it in the way the cabin timbers creaked, settling in for the night. Winter was coming early this year. He could taste it in the air, see it in the way the animals were fattening up faster than usual. He'd be alone for it. Again. The thought sat in his chest like a stone. He banked the fire, checked the door latches, and climbed the stairs to the bedroom that took up the entire 2nd floor. Empty space stretched out around the bed, room for trunks and wardrobes and all the domestic things that never materialized. Sleep came hard, the way it always did after a departure. He lay in the darkness and listened to the cabin settle, each small sound amplified by silence. Somewhere around midnight, He gave up pretending and went back downstairs. The box was in the cupboard where he'd left it, hidden behind sacks of flour and dried beans. He pulled it out and set it on the table, hesitating before opening the lid. Letters. Dozens of them. Responses to his advertisements that had arrived over the years, each one a small hope that had eventually turned to ash. He shouldn't read them. Knew better than to torture himself like this. But his hands moved anyway, pulling out the neatly folded pages and spreading them across the table. Dear Mr. Boone, your description of mountain life sounds like a grand adventure. I've always dreamed of living somewhere wild and free. A strong man like yourself must need someone to... Words, just words. Every one of these women had written them with some version of hope or desperation or simple practicality. And every one had discovered that words on paper were different from reality waiting at the end of a stagecoach line. He was gathering them up to shove back in the box when he noticed one he'd missed. Must have been stuck to another letter. The paper was different, cheaper stock, slightly yellowed. The handwriting was cramped and practical, not the careful penmanship of the others. His eyes caught on the first line and stopped. Mr. Boone, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not pretty, and I'm not gentle, and I'm probably not what you're hoping for. Elias sat down slowly, still reading. I'm 31 years old, 5'10", built like a farmhand because I've been one since I was 12. I can outwork most men, and I've got the muscles to prove it. I've got a face my mother called handsome when she was being kind and unfortunate when she was honest, hair that won't hold a curl, hands like a laborer, voice too loud for proper company. He found himself leaning forward. I've tried the normal path, worked in boarding houses, factories, shops. Always the same problem. I take up too much space, move too rough, talk too direct. Men don't want a woman who can lift what they lift. Women don't want a friend who makes them look delicate by comparison. I saw your advertisement and I'm not going to pretend the mountain sounds romantic. It sounds hard, isolated, the kind of place that breaks people who aren't already broken in the right ways. But here's what I can offer. I can work. I can build. I can hunt and fish and preserve food and keep a house standing through a hard winter. I won't complain about rough living because I've never known any other kind. I won't expect pretty words or gentle handling. I won't leave at the first sign of difficulty. What I need is space, room to be as big as I actually am without apologizing for it. A partnership, not a performance. Work that matters more than work that looks proper. If that sounds like something you might want, write back. If not, burn this letter and forget I wasted your time. Mara Whitlock. There was no date on the letter, no return address, just a name at the bottom in that same cramped, practical hand. Elias read it 3 more times. The words didn't change, but something in his chest did. He looked around the empty cabin, at the sturdy furniture and cold fireplace and rooms meant for a life that never happened, looked at the letter in his hands. I won't leave at the first sign of difficulty. Every other woman had promised to try. This one promised not to quit. It was probably nothing. The letter could be months old, years old. She'd likely found some other situation by now, some other answer to whatever problem had driven her to write to a stranger on a mountain. But his hand was moving before he'd fully decided, reaching for paper and pencil. The pencil felt awkward in his calloused fingers. He never wrote much, just supply lists and the occasional business letter to the trading post down in the valley. Personal correspondence wasn't something he'd had much use for. He stared at the blank page for a long time. What did you say to a woman who'd described herself as unfortunate and too big and too loud? How did you respond to that kind of raw honesty? Finally, he wrote 2 words. Come, E.B. He stared at what he'd written, added one more line. Winter's coming. If you're coming, come now. It wasn't poetry, wasn't even particularly friendly, but it was true, and truth was the only thing he had to offer. He addressed the envelope to Mara Whitlock, care of General Delivery, Providence, Rhode Island. The return address printed on the envelope her letter had come in. Folded his response, sealed it, and set it by the door to take to the trading post in the morning. Then he went back to bed and slept better than he had in months. The trading post sat at the base of the mountain where the trail widened enough for wagon traffic. Elias made the trip once a week for supplies and mail, riding down on horseback in the early morning and back up before noon. Jed Cooper ran the place, a wiry man in his 60s who'd seen everything twice and believed half of it. He was behind the counter sorting mail when Elias walked in.
This story was
Boone,
posted on the
Jed
channel
nodded.
west of Betrayal.
Heard your latest
Please do not
prospect caught the
repost it
eastbound
in any
stage.
form.
News traveled fast in small communities. Elias grunted acknowledgement and set his letter on the counter. Need this posted? Jed picked it up, squinted at the address. Rhode Island. Hell, that's a long way to be sending mail. His eyes sharpened with interest. Another bride prospect? Maybe. Maybe? Jed laughed. Son, you got the worst luck with women I ever seen. What's this one's story? Elias pulled coins from his pocket and counted out postage. Don't know yet. Well, she can't be worse than the last one. That Rebecca girl spent her whole 4 days complaining about everything from the stairs being too steep to the water being too cold. Jed shook his head. Some people don't know good when they see it. Elias didn't answer. He picked up the few letters that had arrived for him, mostly bills and advertisements, and headed for the door. Boone. Jed's voice stopped him. For what it's worth, I think you got a good setup up there. Just need someone with the spine to appreciate it. Thanks, Jed. The ride back up the mountain gave him too much time to think. What if she didn't write back? What if she did? What if she was like all the others, full of ideas about pioneer life that crumbled the minute reality set in? He tried not to hope. Hope was dangerous for men like him, but the letter had burrowed under his skin somehow. That blunt honesty, the way she described herself without apology or self-pity. I take up too much space. He knew that feeling, knew what it was like to move through a world that wanted you smaller, quieter, less. The cabin was exactly as he'd left it, empty and waiting. He spent the afternoon splitting wood for winter, his axe rising and falling in steady rhythm. Physical work helped, kept his mind from spinning in circles. Days passed, a week, 2. He told himself to forget about it. The letter had probably gotten lost, or she'd changed her mind, or 100 other reasons why silence was the only answer he'd get. But he checked the mail every trip down the mountain anyway. 3 weeks after he'd sent his response, Jed handed him a letter with a crooked smile. Providence, Rhode Island. Elias took it outside before opening it, sat on the bench by the trading post door, and unfolded the single page. Mr. Boone, I'll arrive on the November 15th stage. I own 2 trunks and a decent mare. I expect nothing, and I'm bringing everything I need to survive if this doesn't work out. Don't meet me with flowers or pretty words. I've had enough of both to last a lifetime. W. November 15th was 8 days away. Elias read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Went back inside and bought coffee and sugar and dried fruit, things he normally skipped to save money. Special occasion? Jed asked. Maybe. The ride home felt different this time. The cabin didn't look empty when he walked through the door. It looked waiting. He spent the next week working like a man possessed, repaired loose boards on the porch, fixed the shutter that had been hanging crooked for months, cleaned the kitchen until the counters gleamed, washed windows, aired out blankets. Not because he thought she'd care about any of it, but because it gave him something to do besides wonder what the hell he'd gotten himself into. November 15th dawned cold and clear. He rode down to the trading post 2 hours early and waited. The stagecoach was on time for once. Elias watched it roll up in a cloud of dust and rattle to a stop. The driver climbed down, opened the door. A woman emerged. She was tall. That was the first thing he noticed. Tall enough that she had to duck slightly coming through the coach door. She straightened and looked around with the assessing gaze of someone calculating threats and resources. Her dress was plain brown wool, practical and worn. Dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Face that definitely wasn't pretty in any conventional sense. Too strong in the jaw, too broad in the cheekbones. But there was something compelling about it. Something that made you want to keep looking. She spotted him immediately. Her eyes swept over him once, head to toe, the same way he'd seen men size up horses at auction. Then she walked toward him. Elias Boone? Her voice was exactly what she'd described. Too loud for polite company, with an edge that suggested she didn't give a damn about polite company. That's me. Mara Whitlock. She didn't offer her hand, just stood there watching him with those sharp eyes. You're bigger than I expected. You're taller than I expected. Does that bother you? No? Good. She turned to the driver. My trunks are the brown ones, and I need my mare unloaded. The driver scrambled to comply. Clearly, Mara Whitlock was a woman used to being obeyed. Elias helped with the trunks, heavy, packed with the kind of weight that suggested someone who meant to stay, or at least survive leaving. The mare was a solid bay, well-muscled and calm. She's a good animal, Elias said. I know. Mara checked the saddle, adjusted a strap. Raised her myself. She's worth more than most men I've met. There was a story there, but Elias didn't ask. He loaded the trunks into his wagon while Mara mounted her horse with the easy competence of someone who'd been riding since childhood. It's a 2-hour ride up, he said. Trail gets steep. Then we should stop talking and start riding. She wasn't wrong. They headed up the mountain in silence. Elias led the way, hyper-aware of her presence behind him. Every so often he'd glance back, expecting to see doubt or fear or second thoughts. But Mara just rode, looking around with that same assessing gaze, taking in the pine trees and rocky outcrops and steep drops like someone inventorying assets. The cabin came into view as they rounded the final bend. Elias tried to see it through her eyes. The rough-hewn logs, the stone chimney, the porch that wrapped around two sides. Small windows with real glass. Solid door with iron hinges he'd forged himself. Mara reined in her horse and stared. He waited for the disappointment, the realization that she'd made a mistake. Instead, she said, You built this yourself? Yes. How long? 2 seasons. She dismounted and walked toward it slowly, running her hand along the porch rail, testing its sturdiness. She climbed the steps, they didn't creak, and stood at the door. Can I see inside? Elias swung down from his horse and opened the door. Mara walked in and stopped. He watched her take it all in. The large kitchen with its iron stove and handmade cabinets, the main room with its stone fireplace and solid furniture, the stairs leading up to the second floor. How many rooms? 6 total, 3 up, 3 down. She walked through slowly, opening doors, checking corners, ran her hand along counters and walls, looked out windows. Finally, she turned to face him. The other women, why did they leave? The question surprised him. Most tried to pretend there hadn't been others. Said it was too isolated, too rough. Said I was too... He gestured at himself, not sure how to finish. Too big, Mara said flatly. Too intimidating, too different from what they wanted. Yeah. She nodded slowly. I spent my whole life being told I was too much of all those things. Too big for a woman, too strong, too loud, too direct, too... everything. She looked around the cabin again. This place, it's got room for too much. Something in Elias's chest loosened. Mara moved to the kitchen, examining the stove. This work? Yeah. Good. I'm starving, and I don't eat small portions. She started pulling things from his cupboards, flour, lard, dried meat, preserved vegetables he'd barely touched. You got any fresh eggs? Chickens are out back. Then go get me 6 eggs and stop standing there like you've seen a ghost. Elias blinked. Then for the first time in longer than he could remember, he almost smiled. He went outside to the coop and gathered eggs while trying to process what was happening. Inside his cabin, a woman who'd been here less than 20 minutes was taking over his kitchen like she owned it, and he didn't mind. When he came back with the eggs, Mara had already started a fire in the stove and was mixing dough with quick, efficient movements. She glanced at the eggs. Fresh? This morning. Good. She cracked 4 into a bowl, moving with the practiced ease of someone who'd cooked 1,000 meals. Sit down. This'll be ready soon. Elias sat at his own table and watched her work. There was nothing delicate about the way she moved, no graceful gestures or careful arranging. She worked like someone focused on function, not form. Chopped vegetables with aggressive efficiency, stirred the pot like she was punishing it. But the smells rising from the stove were incredible. How long since you had a decent meal? She asked, without turning around. Define decent. Something that wasn't dried meat and stale bread. Couple months. Figured. She added something to the pot that sizzled. You built this whole place yourself, but you can't cook worth a damn. That about right? Pretty much. Well, that's
This
going to
story
change.
was posted on the
She
channel
pulled the
west
biscuits
of
from the
Betrayal.
oven, golden
Please do
and
not
perfect,
repost it
and
in any
ladled stew
form.
into 2 bowls. Set one in front of him with a spoon. Eat. Elias picked up the spoon and tasted it. The flavor hit him like a physical thing, rich and warm and complex. Vegetables and meat cooked in a gravy that had actual seasoning. Real food, the kind he'd forgotten existed. He looked up at Mara. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. It's good, he said quietly. I know. She sat down across from him and started eating with the same efficient intensity she brought to everything else. I'm a good cook. One of the few things I'm allowed to be good at without apologizing for it. They ate in silence for a few minutes. Elias couldn't remember the last time his kitchen had felt this alive. Heat from the stove, smells of real cooking, another person sharing the space. So, Mara wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. We should probably talk about expectations. All right. I'm not here to be rescued. I'm not here to play house or pretend to be something I'm not. I'm here because I need space and purpose and honest work, and you're offering that whether you know it or not. Elias nodded slowly. I don't do gentle. I don't do quiet. I swear when I'm angry, and I argue when I disagree, and I won't shrink myself down to make anyone comfortable. Okay. I pull my weight. More than my weight. I expect the same from anyone around me. I don't tolerate laziness or dishonesty or people who promise one thing and deliver another. Fair enough. Mara leaned back in her chair, studying him. You're not what I expected either. No? Letter made you sound harder, colder, but you've got kind eyes. She said it like an accusation. That going to be a problem? What? Kindness. It makes people think they can take advantage, makes them think soft means weak. Elias thought about that. I'm not soft. Didn't say you were. Asked if the kindness was going to be a problem. Don't see how. Mara nodded once, decision made. Then we'll make this work. Just like that. No drama, no second guessing. She'd decided, and that was that. Elias finished his stew, scraping the bowl clean. Thank you for the meal. You'll thank me by not eating like a starving dog from now on. She stood and started collecting dishes. I'll clean up. You bring in my trunks. Yes, ma'am. The corner of her mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Elias brought in the trunks while Mara scrubbed dishes with the same aggressive efficiency she brought to everything. He set them at the base of the stairs. Which room is mine? She called from the kitchen. The question caught him off guard. He'd assumed but then she'd been clear in her letter. Partnership, not performance. Upstairs, your choice of 3? She dried her hands and climbed the stairs. He heard her walking around, opening doors. After a few minutes, she called down. The one facing east, I like morning light. It's yours. The sound of a trunk being dragged across the floor. Mara unpacking, claiming space, making herself at home. Elias stood in his kitchen and listened to another person moving through his house. The sound that 5 other women had made for a few days before disappearing. But this felt different. This felt like something that might actually last. That first night, Elias lay awake listening to the sounds of someone else in his house. Floorboards creaking overhead. The rustle of fabric as Mara unpacked. A thud when something heavy hit the floor, followed by a muttered curse that carried clearly through the ceiling. He smiled in the darkness. Morning came cold and sharp. Elias woke at his usual time, before dawn, and dressed quietly. He was halfway down the stairs when he smelled coffee. Mara was already in the kitchen, fully dressed, hair pulled back in that same severe bun. She had the stove going and was frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet that she must have pulled from one of her trunks because he'd never owned one that nice. You always get up this early, Bun? She asked without turning around. Farm doesn't run itself. Good. I hate lazy mornings. She cracked another egg one-handed into the pan. How do you take your eggs? However they come. That's not an answer. Cooked. She snorted. You're going to have to do better than that. I'm not running a boarding house where everyone eats the same slop. You want them scrambled, fried, boiled? You tell me. Fried. Over easy. See, that wasn't hard. She slid 2 eggs onto a plate, added biscuits left over from last night, and set it in front of him. Eat. Then show me around this place properly. I want to see what I'm working with. The eggs were perfect, white set, yolks still runny. Elias ate while Mara stood at the counter with her own plate, eating standing up like someone who'd spent too many years grabbing meals between shifts. You don't have to stand, he said. I like standing. Sitting makes me restless. She finished her eggs in 4 bites. You done? Elias swallowed the last of his biscuit. Yeah. Then let's go. The tour started at the chicken coop. 8 hens scratched in the dirt, healthy and fat. Mara counted them, checked their feathers, examined the nesting boxes. You keep them locked up at night? Yeah, foxes. Good. She scattered feed with practiced motions. They're well fed. You're doing something right. From there to the barn, small but solid, housing his 2 draft horses and Mara's bay mare. She checked each stall, ran her hands along the walls, testing for rot, looked up at the roof beams. This is good work, she said. Better than good. Most men would have cut corners. Cutting corners means doing it twice. Exactly. She patted one of the draft horses absently. What are their names? Don't have any. Mara looked at him like he'd admitted to something shameful. You've had these animals how long? 3 years. 3 years and you never named them? Didn't seem necessary. Well, it is now. She pointed to the larger gelding. That's Sam. And this one, the smaller mare, is Della. You can't just name someone else's horses. I just did. They need names. Everything needs a name. She moved to the next stall where her mare stood. This is Rosie. Elias looked at the horse. That horse is not a Rosie. No? What would you call her? He studied the bay mare. Tall, muscular, with intelligent eyes and a stubborn set to her jaw. Maggie. Maggie. Mara tried it out. Yeah, okay, Maggie works. She looked at him with something like approval. See, you do know how to name things. They continued the tour. The root cellar, dug deep into the hillside and stocked with preserved vegetables. The smokehouse, empty now, but ready for winter butchering. The workshop where Elias kept his tools, axes, saws, hammers, all maintained with the care of someone who depended on them. Mara picked up a handmade draw knife, testing its edge with her thumb. You make this? Yeah. It's good. Sharp. She set it down carefully. You do metalwork too? Enough to get by. Show me. He showed her the small forge in the corner, the anvil, the hammers and tongs, explained how he'd taught himself from a book, trial and error mostly, ruining more iron than he'd successfully shaped. Make me something, Mara said suddenly. What? Right now. Make me something small. I want to see you work. Elias hesitated, then moved to the forge, got the fire going, selected a piece of scrap iron. He heated it until it glowed orange, then brought it to the anvil and shaped it with quick, precise strikes. The rhythm of it was familiar, comforting. 10 minutes later, he quenched the finished piece in water. Steam hissed up in a cloud. He held it out to her. A simple meat hook, functional and plain. Mara took it, turning it over in her hands, tested its strength, examined the curve. This is exactly what I needed for the kitchen. How did you know? Didn't. Just made what came out. She looked at him for a long moment. You're either very lucky or very observant. Maybe both. Maybe. She pocketed the hook. All right, show me the fields. They walked the cleared land, about 3 acres carved out of forest, divided into sections. One for corn, one for beans, one line fallow for next season. The crops had been harvested already, stalks cut and bundled. You do all this yourself? Mara asked. Yeah. That's a lot of work for one person. It's what needs doing. She nodded slowly, looking out over the fields. Next year we'll expand, another acre at least. Maybe 2 if we clear through winter. We. She'd said we. Elias felt that loosening in his chest again. They climbed higher up the mountain, following a trail Elias had worn over the years. Mara kept pace easily, her long legs covering ground with the same efficient stride she brought to everything. At the summit, they stood looking out over the valley below. The trading post was visible as a small cluster of buildings. Beyond that, forest stretched in every direction, broken only by the
This
thin
story
ribbon
was
of the main
posted
road.
on the channel west
It's
of
isolated,
Betrayal.
Mara said.
Please do not
complaining,
repost it in any
just stating
form.
fact. Yeah. How often do you go down? Once a week for supplies and mail, more if there's need. And the nearest neighbor? 5 miles east, family named Patterson. Keep to themselves mostly. Mara nodded. Good. I'm done with neighbors who think proximity gives them the right to judge. They stood in silence for a while. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals. The other women, Mara said. They stood up here too? Most of them. And what did they say? Elias thought back. Said it was beautiful, breathtaking, all the right words. But they said it scared, made them feel small. Mara looked out at the endless forest. It doesn't make me feel small, it makes me feel like there's finally enough room. Something tight in Elias's chest, something that had been clenched for years, started to unwind. They walked back down as the sun climbed higher. At the cabin, Mara rolled up her sleeves. All right, time to work. What needs doing most? Wood needs splitting for winter. I'm about 2 cords short. Then let's split wood. She wasn't kidding. Mara grabbed an axe from the shed, not the lighter one most women would choose, but the full-size splitting maul, and attacked the woodpile with the same aggressive efficiency she brought to cooking. Her form was perfect. Feet planted, weight balanced, bringing the maul up and down in a smooth arc that split logs cleanly down the middle. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Elias worked beside her, falling into the rhythm. The sound of axes biting wood echoed across the clearing. Twice he glanced over and caught her watching him with that assessing look, like she was calculating something. After an hour, she stopped and wiped sweat from her forehead. You work like someone who learned the hard way. Only way I know. Same. She stretched her back. My father ran a farm outside Providence, 6 kids. I was the oldest and the strongest. Spent my childhood doing work that should have been split between 3 people. That why you left? Part of it. She picked up another log, positioned it on the chopping block. He died when I was 20. Farm went to my oldest brother. He decided I was taking up too much space and eating too much food. Told me to find a husband or find somewhere else to live. The axe came down hard, splitting the log with a crack like a gunshot. Tried the husband route first, figured it was expected. Another log, another violent split. Turned out men don't want a wife who's stronger than they are, or taller, or louder, or any of the things I couldn't help being. Elias set up his next log. Their loss. Mara paused, axe raised. You mean that? Yeah. She brought the axe down. Most men say things like that when they're trying to be kind. They don't actually mean it. I'm not most men. No. She looked at him directly. You're really not. They worked until the sun was high overhead and the woodpile had grown significantly. Mara finally set down her axe and stretched. I'm hungry enough to eat a horse. Not Maggie, I hope. That surprised a laugh out of her, short and sharp, but genuine. No, not Maggie, but something substantial. Inside, Mara took over the kitchen again. Elias watched her work, fascinated by the way she moved through the space like she'd been doing it for years instead of hours. She pulled out supplies, assembled ingredients, created something from nothing. You just going to stand there? She asked without turning around. Trying to stay out of your way. Then make yourself useful. Peel those potatoes. Elias picked up a knife and started peeling. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling with useless words. What happened with the last one? Mara asked suddenly. The 5th bride. What was her breaking point? Elias thought about Rebecca or Rachel. Said the cabin was too big, too empty. Said it made her feel like she was rattling around in something built for someone else. Was she wrong? No? Mara glanced at him. You built this place for a family that didn't exist yet. Seemed like the right thing to do. Build it big enough and maybe the family would come to fill it. He set down another peeled potato. Turns out that's not how it works. No, it's not. She added the potatoes to the pot. But maybe you were just building it for the wrong kind of family. What's the right kind? The kind that doesn't need you to be smaller to fit. She stirred the pot. The kind that can stand in all this space without feeling lost. Elias thought about that while they finished preparing the meal. It was a different way of looking at things, not building something and hoping the right people would shrink to fit, but finding people big enough to fill it properly. Lunch was potato soup with thick chunks of salt pork and fresh bread Mara had somehow made while he was bringing in water. They ate at the table, and this time Mara sat down instead of standing. "Tell me about winter up here," she said. "It's hard. Snow gets deep, sometimes up to the porch rail. Wind comes through cold enough to freeze anything left outside. You can go weeks without seeing another person. Food? What we preserve, what we hunt. Trail down the mountain becomes impassable once the real snow hits." Mara nodded slowly. "So we're on our own." "Basically." "Good." She tore off a piece of bread. "I do better on my own anyway." "You're not on your own anymore." She looked up at him, something complicated crossing her face. "No, I guess I'm not." The afternoon was spent on smaller tasks. Mara insisted on inventorying the entire kitchen, pulling out every pot and pan and utensil, examining each one, making notes in a small ledger she'd brought. "You're missing half of what you need," she announced. "No decent mixing bowls, no proper bread pans, no—" She held up a bent ladle. "Anything that actually works right. It's been functional." "Functional isn't good enough. We're making a list for your next trip down." Elias watched her write in quick, cramped handwriting. "You planning to cook a lot?" "I'm planning to eat well, and so are you, whether you know it or not." She added another item to the list. "A man your size, doing the work you do, you need real food, not whatever survival rations you've been choking down." "It kept me alive." "Alive isn't the same as living." She capped her pencil and looked at him. "You spent years building this place into something good. Then you lived in it like a prisoner. That ends now." The conviction in her voice made it sound like a promise. That evening, Mara cooked again. This time it was venison stew with vegetables and herbs Elias didn't even know he had. She served it with fresh biscuits and something that might have been gravy. Elias ate 3 bowls. "That's more like it," Mara said with satisfaction. "You've been half-starving yourself." "Wasn't intentional?" "Maybe not, but it stops anyway." After dinner, they sat on the porch. The sun was setting behind the ridge, painting everything gold and purple. Elias had sat here alone hundreds of times, watching this same sunset. It felt different with company. "The other women," Mara said quietly. "Did you sit out here with them?" "A few times." "What did they talk about?" Elias thought back. Mostly what they missed from back east. City things, society, people, complained about the quiet. "I like the quiet." "Yeah." "Yeah." She leaned back in her chair. "Spent my whole life in places that were too loud, too crowded, too full of people who wanted me to be something I wasn't. This," she gestured at the forest, the mountains, the vast empty space. "This is the first place I've been where the silence doesn't feel like judgment." Elias understood that more than he could say. They sat without talking as darkness crept in. Somewhere an owl called. The temperature dropped and Mara pulled her shawl tighter. "I should tell you something," Elias said finally, "about why I'm up here. You don't owe me your story." "I know, but you should hear it anyway." He stared out at the darkening forest. "I grew up in a mining town in Pennsylvania. Worked the mines from the time I was 12. Hard work, dangerous. Killed my father when I was 15. Mara didn't say anything, just listened. "I kept working. Got big because the work demanded it. Got strong because weak men didn't last. By the time I was 20, I was pulling shifts that should have been split between 2 people. He flexed his hands, remembering. Made good money. Saved most of it. Had a girl I was planning to marry. What happened? She took one look at what the mines were doing to me, the scars, the coal dust, the way I was built like something carved from rock, and decided she wanted someone softer, someone who could take her to church on Sunday without looking like he'd crawled out of the earth. The words came easier than he expected. I left after that, took my savings and headed west, figured I'd find somewhere I could build something that mattered. somewhere I could be what I was without apologizing for it. And you found this mountain. Yeah. But the women you brought here, they wanted you to be different anyway. They wanted the place.
This
Just not the
story was
man who came
posted
with
on the
it.
channel West of
He turned to
Betrayal.
look at her.
Please do not repost
What about
it
you?
in any form.
What about me? You got a story for why you're here instead of anywhere else? Mara was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was harder than usual. I told you about the farm, about my father dying. What I didn't tell you was what happened after my brother kicked me out. She pulled the shawl tighter. I tried everything, worked in factories, boarding houses, shops. Every place was the same. Men who thought my size meant I should be grateful for any attention. Women who saw me as competition or threat. I tried to make myself smaller, talked quieter, moved gentler, wore dresses that hid my build. Did it work? For about a week. Then I lifted something heavy without thinking, and a man said, her voice went flat, said, no real woman should be able to do what I did. Said I was unnatural. Elias felt anger stir in his chest. After that, I stopped trying. Figured if I was going to be unwanted anyway, I might as well be unwanted while being myself. Answered your advertisement because it was honest. You didn't lie about what you were offering, didn't dress it up in pretty words. And now you're here. Now I'm here. She looked at him. And tomorrow I'm going to start fixing this place up properly. No more half measures. No more just surviving. We're going to live here. Actually live. The determination in her voice was absolute. That night, Elias lay in bed listening to the sounds of the cabin settling. Above him, he heard Mara moving around. The creak of her bed as she sat down. The thump of boots hitting the floor. Then silence. He closed his eyes and let himself hope just a little that maybe this time would be different. Morning came with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Elias dressed and went downstairs to find Mara already cooking, her hair in a loose braid instead of the severe bun. You're up late, she said. Sun's been up for 20 minutes. It's barely dawn. That's what I said, late. She flipped bacon in the pan. Eat fast, we've got work to do. What kind of work? The kind that should have been done months ago. After breakfast, Mara led him outside with a critical eye. She walked the perimeter of the cabin, examining every board, every shingle, every window frame. This shutter's loose. That railing's starting to rot. The chimney needs repointing. She made mental notes of everything. When's the last time you did maintenance? I fix things when they break. That's reactive, not proactive. We're getting ahead of problems before they become problems. She pointed to the porch. Today we're fixing everything I saw yesterday. Tomorrow we start on winter preparations. I've been doing winter preparations. You've been splitting wood and hoping for the best. That's not the same thing. She grabbed a hammer from the workshop. Come on, daylight's wasting. They spent the day working side by side. Mara had a gift for seeing what needed doing and the skill to do it right. She didn't ask for help when she needed it, just held out her hand and waited for the right tool. By afternoon, the porch was solid, the shutters hung straight, and half the repairs on Mara's list were done. You're good at this, Elias said, watching her finish nailing down a loose board. I'm good at a lot of things. Just never had anyone appreciate it before. She straightened, wiping sweat from her face. You know what this place needs? What? A proper garden, not just vegetables for eating, herbs for cooking, maybe some flowers. Elias blinked. Flowers? Don't look at me like that. I'm not talking about being decorative. I'm talking about having something growing that isn't just functional, something that exists because it's alive and that's reason enough. He thought about that, about 5 years of treating this place like a work camp instead of a home. Okay. Okay. Mara looked surprised. Just like that? You want flowers? Plant flowers. It's your place too now. Something shifted in her expression, softened just slightly around the edges. Yeah, she said quietly. I guess it is. That evening, they sat on the porch again. This was becoming a routine, Elias realized. Work all day, sit together as the sun went down. Not talking much, just being. How long you planning to stay? He asked. Mara turned to look at him. That a polite way of asking when I'm leaving? No, just wondering if you've thought about it. I've thought about it. She was quiet for a moment. Every other place I've been, I counted days, figured out how long until I'd saved enough to leave, or until they got tired of me and asked me to go. This is the first place I haven't counted. That good or bad? Good. She said it with certainty. Definitely good. The stars came out, sharp and bright in the clear mountain air. Elias pointed out constellations he'd learned as a kid. Mara listened, asking questions, remembering details. My mother used to tell stories about the stars, she said. Said they were people who'd lived big lives, so bright they couldn't help but shine even after they were gone. You believe that? No, but I liked the idea of it, that being too much could be a good thing if you were in the right place. You think this is the right place? Mara looked at him, then at the cabin, then up at the stars. Yeah, she said. I really do. Inside, as they got ready for bed, Mara paused at the bottom of the stairs. Elias? Yeah? Thank you for the letter, for saying come instead of giving me pretty words and empty promises. Didn't know what else to say. It was perfect. She started up the stairs, then stopped. And thank you for making room, not just in the cabin, for making room for someone like me. Before he could respond, she was gone, footsteps disappearing up to the second floor. Elias stood in the kitchen, her words echoing in his head. Someone like me. As if there was anyone else in the world like Mara Whitlock. He smiled in the darkness and went to bed with something he hadn't felt in years, the absolute certainty that tomorrow would be better than today. The first real argument came 3 weeks after Mara arrived, on a morning when frost painted the windows white and their breath fogged the air inside the cabin. Elias came downstairs to find Mara rearranging his workshop. Not just tidying, completely reorganizing. Tools hung on new pegs she'd hammered into the walls. His workbench had been moved to catch better light. Supplies were sorted into wooden crates she must have built herself. What are you doing? He didn't mean for it to come out sharp, but it did. Mara didn't look up from sorting nails by size. Making this space functional. Half your tools were buried under scrap metal. How do you find anything? I know where everything is. You knew where everything was. Now you'll actually be able to see it. She drove another nail into the wall with 3 efficient strikes. This workshop was wasted space. I'm fixing it. Without asking. Now she looked at him. You want me to ask permission to improve things? I want you to not move my stuff around like you own the place. The words hung in the air between them. Mara set down her hammer slowly. I thought I did own the place, or at least part of it. That's what partnership means, doesn't it? Partnership doesn't mean taking over. No, it means both people get to make decisions. Her voice had an edge now. Or did you just want someone to cook your meals and warm your bed without having opinions about anything else? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Elias struggled to put it into words. This is how I've done things for 5 years. My systems, my way of organizing. You've been here 3 weeks and you're changing everything. Because your systems were terrible. She gestured at the workshop. You had saws mixed with hammers, mixed with nails, mixed with who knows what else. That's not a system. That's chaos. It was my chaos. Well, now it's our order. She picked up the hammer again. And if you want to argue about it, we can argue. But I'm not undoing good work just because you're uncomfortable with change. They stared at each other across the workshop. The morning sun cut through the window, illuminating dust motes between them. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met, Elias said. Good. You're the most stubborn man I've ever met. We're matched. Despite himself, Elias felt the anger drain away. She wasn't wrong about the workshop. It had been a mess. He just never wanted to admit it. Fine, he said. Keep organizing, but next time tell me before you start moving things. I'll think about it. Mara. I said I'll think about it. But the corner of her mouth twitched. Now get out of here. I've got 3 more walls to do and you're blocking the light. He left her to it, shaking his head. The woman was impossible. By noon, the workshop was transformed. Everything had a place. Tools hung organized by type and size. Hardware sorted into labeled containers. The workbench cleared and ready for actual work. Elias stood in the doorway, taking it in. I hate that you're right. Get used to it. I'm right about most things. Mara wiped her hands on her apron. Now come on. We need to butcher that deer you shot yesterday before it spoils. They worked together in the cold air behind the cabin, Mara directing while Elias handled the heavier cutting. She knew exactly
This
how to
story
break
was
down the
posted
carcass,
on the channel
where to
west
cut,
of
what to
Betrayal.
save.
Please
nothing
do not
wasted.
repost it in any
Where'd
form.
you learn this? He asked. Farm, remember? We butchered everything ourselves. Pigs, chickens, cattle, deer when we could get them. She separated a section of meat with practiced efficiency. My brothers hated it, couldn't stomach the blood, but I didn't mind, just seemed practical. Most women I've known couldn't handle this. Most women you've known were raised to think being useful was unladylike. She pointed with her knife. Hand me that basin. By evening, they had the meat processed and hanging in the smokehouse, salted and ready for curing. Mara surveyed their work with satisfaction. That'll last us through January if we're careful. Maybe longer. We? She looked at him. You keep saying that like you're surprised I'm planning to stay. Are you? Where else would I go? She said it matter-of-factly, like the answer was obvious. I've got work here. Purpose. A partner who doesn't try to make me smaller. She headed toward the cabin. Yes, Elias, I'm staying. Stop asking. But she was smiling when she said it. That night over dinner, venison stew, rich and dark, Mara brought up winter preparations again. We need more firewood, at least another cord. I'll get to it. We'll get to it, together. She tore off a piece of bread. Also need to check the roof before the snow comes. Make sure we're not going to have leaks. Already did that last month. And then we'll do it again, belt and suspenders. She pointed her spoon at him. And we need to talk about food storage. You've got enough preserved vegetables, but we're short on dried fruit and we could use more beans. I'll add it to the list for next week's trip down. I'm coming with you. Elias paused mid-bite. To the trading post? That's where you go for supplies, isn't it? Yeah, but it's a rough ride. 4 hours down, 4 hours back. And I've been riding since I was 6. I can handle a mountain trail. She gave him a look. Or are you worried about what people will say when they see you've got a woman now? That's not... Because I don't particularly care what a bunch of valley people think about me. Never have, never will. Elias set down his spoon. It's not about what they'll think. It's about Jed Cooper asking 100 nosy questions and everyone else staring. Let them stare. They'll get bored eventually. She finished her stew. I need to see what supplies are available anyway. Can't plan properly if I don't know what we're working with. There was no arguing with her when she got like this. Elias had learned that much already. Fine. We leave at dawn. Good. She stood and started clearing dishes. And we're taking my list. Yours is incomplete. The next morning they rode down together, Mara on Maggie and Elias on Sam. The trail was steep and narrow in places, requiring careful navigation. Mara handled it without complaint, sitting easy in the saddle like she'd been riding this path for years. At the trading post, Jed Cooper's eyes went wide when they walked in together. Boone, and you must be... Mara Whitlock. She shook his hand with a grip that made him wince. I need to see what you stock for winter provisions. Yes, of course. Dried fruit, beans, flour, sugar, salt, coffee, cornmeal. She pulled out her list. Also need proper mixing bowls, bread pans, and a decent set of kitchen knives. What Elias has up there is embarrassing. Jed shot Elias a look that was half amused, half sympathetic. I'll see what I can put together. While Jed assembled their order, 3 other customers came in. All 3 stopped and stared. 2 women whispered to each other behind their hands. A man in work clothes looked Mara up and down with obvious interest. Something you need? Mara asked him directly. The man flushed. No, ma'am. Just surprised to see Boone with company. Well, now you've seen it. You can stop staring. The man mumbled an apology and left quickly. Elias suppressed a smile. The way Mara handled people, direct and unafraid, was something to witness. By the time they had everything loaded, word had spread. Several people had found reasons to be near the trading post, all of them trying to get a look at Boone's new woman. This happen every time you come down? Mara asked as they rode away. Not usually this bad. They act like they've never seen a woman before. They've never seen a woman like you before. She glanced at him. That a compliment or an observation? Both. They rode in silence for a while, climbing back up the mountain. About halfway, Mara spoke again. The man in the trading post. The one who stared. What about him? You didn't get angry, didn't tell him to stop or defend my honor or whatever men usually do. Didn't need to. You handled it yourself. Most men would have made it their problem anyway, territory marking or some such nonsense. Elias thought about that. You're not territory to be marked. You're a person who can speak for herself. Seemed like you were doing fine without my help. Mara was quiet for a long moment. You know what's strange? That's the first time in my life a man has said something like that and actually meant it. Then you've been around the wrong men. Clearly, but her voice had softened. Thanks for not being like them. Don't thank me for basic decency. Someone should. Back at the cabin, they unloaded supplies and Mara immediately started organizing the new kitchen equipment. She held up each piece with the reverence most people reserved for fine china. Real bread pans. Finally. She ran her finger along the edge. You know what this means? Better bread? Better everything. I can actually cook properly now instead of improvising with whatever junk you had lying around. She started arranging things in cabinets. Tomorrow I'm making apple butter, then pickles. Then we're working on that root cellar organization because I saw it, and it's a disaster. Is anything around here organized to your standards? The barn's decent. Everything else needs work. She shot him a look. You survived up here. That's impressive. But surviving and thriving are different things. We're going to thrive. Over the next week, Mara transformed the cabin. Not just organized it, transformed it. Curtains appeared on windows that had been bare for 5 years. Rugs covered cold floors. The kitchen became a place of constant activity, smells of cooking and baking filling the air at all hours. But more than the physical changes, something else was shifting. The cabin felt occupied now, alive, like it had finally become what it was meant to be. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Mara had her feet up on the railing, completely relaxed in a way Elias had never seen before. I need to tell you something, he said. Sounds serious. It is. Sort of. He struggled with how to say it. The other women who came here, I tried to be what they wanted, gentler, quieter, less me. Thought if I just changed enough, they'd stay. Mara looked at him but didn't speak. But with you, I'm not trying to be different. I'm just myself. And that should scare me, but it doesn't. Why would it scare you? Because being myself is what drove everyone else away. Mara set her feet down and turned to face him fully. You want to know what I think? Yeah. I think they left because you were trying to be something you're not. People can smell that. The pretending. It makes them uncomfortable because they don't know who they're dealing with. She leaned forward. But when you're just yourself, this big, quiet, competent man who builds things and means what he says, that's solid. That's real. That's something a person can actually build a life on. You really believe that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. She stood up and stretched. Also, I'm too tired to be philosophical. I'm going to bed. Mara? She paused at the door. You ever regret coming here? She considered the question seriously. No, not once, not even during that argument about the workshop. A pause. You ever regret asking me to come? No? Good. She disappeared inside. Elias sat alone for a while longer, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to endure. It felt like something to build. The first snow came 2 days later, soft flakes that melted on contact but promised heavier falls to come. Mara stood on the porch watching it with an expression Elias couldn't quite read. You okay? Fine. Just thinking. About? About how I almost didn't come. Almost threw your letter away. She held out her hand, catching snowflakes. Thought it was too good to be true. Man offering partnership instead of pretty lies. Seemed like a trap. What changed your mind? Desperation mostly. I was out of options and out of patience for trying to fit into spaces too small for me. She looked at him. but also something about your letter. How short it was. Most men would have written pages trying to convince me. You just wrote come and trusted I'd make my own decision. Didn't seem right to pressure you. No, it wouldn't have been. She came to stand beside him. But you should know something. If this doesn't work,
This story was
if we can't
posted
figure
on
out
the
how to
channel
live
west
together
of
without
the trail.
driving each other crazy,
Please do not repost
I'm not going to
it
slink
in
away
any form.
quietly. I'll tell you straight, and we'll figure it out like adults. Fair enough. Also, I'm not easy to live with. I'm loud and opinionated, and I'll argue when I think you're wrong. I've noticed. And you're stubborn and set in your ways, and sometimes you forget I'm not a mind reader. Also noticed. So we're going to fight, probably a lot. Probably. But I want you to know, she turned to face him fully. Fighting isn't the same as leaving. I can be angry and still stay. Those two things aren't connected for me anymore. Elias felt something settle in his chest. Good, because I can handle angry. It's the silence before people leave that I can't stand. Then we'll be loud together. They stood in the falling snow, shoulder to shoulder, watching the mountain disappear into white. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. Not from worry, from restlessness, energy that needed somewhere to go. He went downstairs and found Mara in the kitchen, kneading bread dough by lamplight. Can't sleep either? She asked without looking up. Something like that. Sit. I'll make coffee. They sat at the kitchen table while Mara worked the dough with strong, rhythmic motions. The repetitive sound was oddly soothing. Tell me something, she said. What's the worst thing about living up here? The isolation used to be. Now it's probably the cold. And the best thing? The quiet. The space. Being able to work without anyone judging whether I'm doing it the right way. He watched her knead. What about you? What's the worst thing so far? Honestly, nothing significant. A few things are harder than I expected, but nothing I can't handle. And the best thing? She paused in her work. The best thing is waking up every morning and not having to apologize for existing. Not having to make myself smaller or quieter or less. Just being able to take up the space I actually need without someone making it a problem. That really how you lived before? Every day. Every single interaction was a calculation. How much is too much? How little is acceptable? Where's the line between being myself and being tolerable? She went back to kneading. Exhausting doesn't begin to cover it. I'm sorry. Don't be. It brought me here, didn't it? She shaped the dough into a ball and set it in a bowl to rise. Besides, I'm not the only one who spent years trying to fit into spaces too small. You did the same thing. How do you figure? Those 5 women. You tried to be what they wanted. Gentler, quieter, whatever. That's shrinking yourself just as much as what I did. She was right. He'd never thought of it that way, but she was absolutely right. So what do? He asked. Just be ourselves and hope it works? No, we be ourselves and make it work. There's a difference. She washed her hands and sat down across from him. Hope is passive. Making is active. We don't hope this works out. We build it into something that works. How? Same way you built this cabin. One piece at a time. Figure out what fits, what doesn't, what needs adjusting. Keep what works, fix what doesn't. She leaned back in her chair. And most importantly, we don't quit when it gets hard. You really think it's that simple? I didn't say simple. I said possible. She stood and poured coffee for both of them. Simple would be easy. This is going to take work. But I've never been afraid of work. They drank coffee in comfortable silence, the cabin warm around them, snow falling soft outside. Mara? Yeah? I'm glad you came. She smiled, a real smile that transformed her whole face. Yeah, me too. The next morning brought 6 inches of fresh snow and temperatures cold enough to freeze water solid in the basin. Mara was already up, dressed in work clothes and heavy boots. We're checking that roof today, she announced, before the next storm hits. It's freezing out there. Which is why we're doing it now instead of waiting until we have leaks. She tossed him his coat. Come on, daylight's wasting. They climbed onto the roof carefully, testing each foothold. Mara moved with confidence despite the ice, checking shingles and flashing with thorough attention. Here. She pointed to a section where the shingles were starting to curl. This needs replacing before it becomes a problem. I'll add it to the list. No, we'll fix it now. Weather might not hold. She was already heading for the ladder. Get your tools. I'll grab the spare shingles from the barn. Working on a snow-covered roof in sub-freezing temperatures was miserable work, but Mara attacked it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, and Elias found himself matching her energy. 2 hours later, the roof was patched, and they were both half frozen. Inside, Mara said through chattering teeth. Hot coffee, now! In the kitchen, they stood close to the stove, warming hands and feet. Mara's face was red from cold, but her eyes were bright. That was stupid, she said. Yeah. We could have waited for better weather. Yeah. But it's done now. One less thing to worry about. Yeah. She looked at him and started laughing. We're ridiculous. He couldn't help it. He laughed too. Standing in the kitchen, half frozen, laughing about their own stubbornness. It felt right. That evening, Elias built up the fire while Mara made dinner. The cabin was warm and full of good smells. Snow fell steady outside, sealing them in. We might be stuck here for a while, he said, if this keeps up. Good. I've got projects inside that need attention anyway. She stirred the pot. And you can start teaching me metalwork. You want to learn metalwork? I want to learn everything you know how to do. Makes sense, doesn't it? Two people with more skills between them can handle more problems. It did make sense. That was the thing about Mara. She saw things practically, without unnecessary emotion or drama. After dinner, Elias showed her the basics at the forge. How to heat metal, how to hammer, how to shape it into something useful. Mara watched with intense concentration, asking questions, trying it herself. Her first attempt was rough, but she kept at it until she'd made a serviceable hook. Not bad, Elias said. Not good either, but it'll improve with practice. She examined her work critically. Show me again. I want to see the wrist motion you use. They worked until late, the forge glowing warm, metal ringing under hammers. Outside, snow kept falling, piling higher against the windows. But inside, two people were building something that would last longer than any storm. When they finally stopped for the night, Mara's hands were blistered despite the gloves and her arms ached from unfamiliar work. But she looked satisfied. Tomorrow, she said, you teach me more, and I'll teach you how to make proper preserves. Fair trade. Deal. They stood in the workshop, tired and dirty, tools scattered around them. This is good, Mara said quietly. What we're building here. Not just the cabin or the work, but this. She gestured between them. Whatever this is. Elias knew what she meant. Partnership wasn't the right word, neither was friendship exactly. It was something else, something they were creating as they went. Yeah, he said. It is good. Mara headed for the door, then stopped. Elias? One more thing. What? Stop waiting for me to leave. I can see it sometimes, in how you look at me, like you're expecting me to disappear. She met his eyes. I'm not going anywhere. You need to actually believe that. The words hit harder than any hammer blow, because she was right. Part of him was still waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to realize this was a mistake. For her to pack her trunks and head back down the mountain. Working on it, he said honestly. Work faster. But she was smiling. I'm not that scary. You're terrifying. Good. Keep thinking that. She disappeared into the house. Elias stood alone in the workshop, listening to the wind howl around the eaves and snow hammer against the walls. The kind of night that would have felt lonely a month ago. Now it just felt like home. Winter locked down hard 3 days later. Snow piled 4 feet deep in some places, drifts reaching halfway up the cabin walls. The trail down the mountain became impassable, just like Elias had warned. They were sealed in until spring thaw. Most people would have panicked at the isolation. Mara thrived in it. Finally, she said, looking out at the wall of white beyond the windows. No interruptions, no distractions, just work. And work they did. Elias had never seen anyone attack winter confinement the way Mara did. She reorganized the entire root cellar in 2 days, built new shelving in the pantry, restructured their food stores by type, and projected depletion date. Created systems for everything from laundry to firewood to meal planning. You treating this place like a military operation, Elias observed, watching her label jars with dates and contents. Military operations don't starve or freeze, neither will we. She finished a label and moved to the next jar. Organization isn't about being controlling. It's about not wasting energy on stupid problems. She wasn't wrong.
This
By
story
the end
was
of the first
posted
week
on the
of full
channel west
lockdown,
of
the
Betrayal.
cabin ran smoother
Please do not
than it ever
repost
had.
it in any form.
They knew exactly what supplies they had, how long they'd last, what needed rationing, and what they could use freely. But more than that, they'd fallen into rhythms together. Elias would wake first and get the fires going. Mara would start breakfast while he handled morning chores, feeding animals, breaking ice on water troughs, checking for damage from overnight storms. They'd eat together, then divide the day's work based on what needed doing most. Some days that meant both of them chopping wood. Other days Mara would cook and preserve while Elias handled repairs. They'd come together for meals, for evening work in the forge or workshop, for those quiet hours on the porch when the weather allowed. It should have felt monotonous. Instead, it felt like building something. The second fight came on a morning when Mara decided to rearrange the furniture. Elias came in from the barn to find her dragging the kitchen table across the room. "What are you doing?" "Moving this. The light's better by the east window." "The table's fine where it is." "The table's blocking foot traffic and sitting in the darkest part of the room. It's going by the window." She gave it another shove. "Mara, stop." She straightened, hands on hips. "Give me one good reason why it should stay where it is." "Because that's where I put it when I built this place." "That's not a reason. That's just stubbornness." "Maybe I like it where it is." "Why? What possible advantage does that position have?" She gestured at the dark corner. "You can't see what you're eating half the time. You have to light extra lamps. It makes no practical sense." "Not everything has to make practical sense." "Yes, it does. Especially when we're living somewhere this isolated, every decision should have a reason behind it." Elias felt his jaw tighten. "Some things are the way they are because I made them that way. That's reason enough." "No, it's not." Mara crossed her arms. "You want to leave it there because changing it means admitting it was in the wrong spot for 5 years. That's pride, not practicality. And you want to move it because you can't stand anything. Not being exactly how you think it should be." The words came out harsher than he meant. Mara's expression hardened. "You're right. I can't stand waste. Can't stand inefficiency. Can't stand people clinging to bad decisions just because admitting they're bad would hurt their feelings." "It's a table, Mara. It's never just a table. It's always about something bigger." She moved toward him. "Every time I try to improve something around here, you fight me on it. The workshop, the root cellar, now this. Like changing anything means I'm saying you did it wrong." You are saying I did it wrong." "Because you did. You built an incredible cabin and then lived in it like you were camping, like you didn't deserve to actually be comfortable in your own home." Her voice rose. "Well, I deserve comfort. I deserve good light and functional systems and furniture that makes sense. And so do you, whether you believe it or not." They stood facing each other across the kitchen, both breathing hard. "Fine," Elias said finally. "Move the damn table." "I don't want to move it if you're just giving in to shut me up." "I'm giving in because you're right. About the light. About me living like I'm camping." He rubbed his face. "But you're wrong about one thing." "What?" "It's not about hurt feelings. It's about..." He struggled for words. "I built this place to be perfect. To be good enough that someone would want to stay. And when that didn't work, I stopped seeing it as a home. Became just a place to exist. Moving the table means admitting that matters again. That comfort matters. That making it nice is worth the effort." Mara's expression shifted. "And that scares you." "Yeah." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she walked over and grabbed one end of the table. "Help me move this. And while we do, you're going to tell me one thing, just one thing, you actually want to change about this place. Not what you think you should want, what you actually want." Elias grabbed the other end. Together they lifted and carried it to the east window. The difference was immediate. Natural light flooded the surface. "Okay," Mara said, setting down her end. "One thing. Go." He looked around the cabin, really looked at it for the first time in years. "The bedroom's too empty. Always has been. Feels like sleeping in a barn." "What would make it better?" Don't know. More furniture, maybe. Something that makes it feel lived in instead of just occupied. Done. We'll build a wardrobe next week. Maybe a chest at the foot of the bed. She moved one of the chairs to test the new layout. See? That wasn't so hard. You're impossible. You keep saying that like it's a bad thing. She stepped back, examining the new arrangement. This is better. Admit it. It was better. The whole room felt different with the table by the window. Yeah, it's better. Good. She started setting out lunch ingredients. Now we don't have to eat in the dark like cave dwellers. That night they sat at the relocated table for dinner. The lamp wasn't even necessary. Moonlight on snow reflected enough light to see clearly. You were right, Elias said. I usually am. But about what specifically? The table. The light. All of it. Mara looked at him over her plate. I'm not trying to erase what you built here. You know that, right? I know. I'm trying to make it ours. Not yours. Not mine. Ours. She set down her fork. That means changing some things. Keeping others. Fighting about which is which. I can live with that. Good. Because I'm not done reorganizing. He almost smiled. Didn't figure you were. The days blurred together in the best way. Work and meals and sleep, punctuated by conversations that ranged from practical to philosophical. They talked about everything, childhoods and failed relationships and dreams they'd given up on. Things Elias had never told anyone, Mara said out loud like they were discussing the weather. I wanted children once, she said one evening while darning socks. Back when I thought I'd have a normal life. Husband, house, family, the whole thing. Elias looked up from the harness he was mending. What changed? Turned out I was too much woman for any man to handle. That's what my aunt said. Mara, you're too much. You'll never find a husband if you don't learn to make yourself less. She pulled thread through fabric with sharp tugs. Spent years trying to be less. Less tall. Less strong. Less loud. Never worked. Just made me miserable. You still want children? She thought about that. Don't know anymore. Gave up thinking about it when I accepted I'd probably never marry. Seemed pointless to want something I'd never have. Things change. Yeah. She glanced at him. They do. What about you? You build a 6-bedroom cabin for no reason? Built it hoping to fill it. Wife, children, maybe family visiting. Thought if I made the space, the people would come. He tested the harness repair. They didn't. The space is still here, though. Yeah, it is. They didn't say anything else about it, but the conversation hung in the air between them, full of possibilities neither was ready to name out loud. A week later, Mara woke him in the middle of the night. Elias, get up! He was on his feet instantly, reaching for the rifle. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Come outside. She was already dressed, pulling on her heavy coat. Elias followed, confused and half asleep, out onto the porch. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant against black sky. And across the northern horizon, lights danced, green and blue and purple, shimmering like curtains in a wind only they could feel. Northern lights? Mara breathed. I've heard about them but never seen them. They stood side by side, watching the sky perform. The lights shifted and swayed, colors bleeding into each other, bright enough to cast shadows on the snow. It's beautiful, Mara said quietly. Elias looked at her instead of the lights. Her face was tilted up, wonder written across her features, all the hard edges softened by amazement. She looked younger, happier, free. Yeah, he said. It is. She caught him staring. What? Nothing, just you look different when you're not working. Different how? Content, like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Mara turned back to the lights. Maybe I am. They stayed outside until the cold drove them back in, wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching the sky dance. When they finally went to bed, something had shifted between them. Something Elias couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. The next morning, Mara brought it up over breakfast. We should talk about what this is. Elias set down his coffee. What is? This. Us. Whatever we're doing here. She gestured between them. We're not employer and employee, not landlord and tenant, not even really roommates anymore. What are we then? That's what I'm asking you. Elias thought about it, about the
This
way they
story
moved
was
around each
posted
other
on
in
the
the
channel
kitchen
west
without
of
getting in each
Betrayal.
other's way.
Please do not
The
repost
way they
it
could
in any
work in
form.
silence for hours without it feeling awkward. The way he looked forward to evenings on the porch, to her sharp commentary on everything, to the sound of her moving around upstairs. Partners, he said finally. Real ones. Equal stake in this place and everything we build here. Is that all? The question was careful, tentative in a way Mara rarely was. I don't know, he admitted. What do you want it to be? I don't know either. That's the problem. She pushed food around her plate. I've never had something like this before, where I can just be myself and someone doesn't eventually get tired of it. Don't know how to categorize it. Does it need categorizing? Probably not, but I like knowing where I stand. You stand right here, same as me, building something together. He met her eyes. Beyond that, we figure it out as we go. Mara nodded slowly. Okay, we figure it out. They left it there, undefined but understood. February came in brutal. Temperatures dropped so low that water froze inside the cabin if they let the fires die. Wind screamed down from the peaks, shaking the walls and finding every tiny gap in the chinking. The kind of weather that could kill you if you weren't prepared. But they were prepared. Thanks to Mara's organization, they knew exactly what they had and how long it would last. They rationed candles and lamp oil, rotated through preserved foods to keep variety in their diet, melted snow for water when breaking ice became too dangerous. This is the worst I've seen it, Elias said one morning, looking out at a landscape completely whited out by blowing snow. How long does it usually last? Days. Sometimes a week? Then we settle in. Mara was already pulling out her mending. Nothing to do but wait it out. Being trapped inside for days at a time tested them in new ways. Elias discovered Mara hated sitting still. She'd work through her entire list of tasks and then invent new ones just to keep moving. Mara learned that Elias needed silence sometimes, needed to retreat into his own head without it meaning something was wrong. They argued over small things made large by proximity. Who left the door unlatched? Whether the fire needed another log. How loud was too loud when one person was trying to think and the other was working. But they also learned how to share space without crowding. Elias would work at the kitchen table while Mara cooked. Mara would read aloud from one of her books while Elias repaired tools. They'd play cards in the evening, arguing over rules, keeping score in a ledger that became increasingly competitive. You're cheating, Mara said during one particularly heated game. I'm not cheating, you're just losing. No one's this lucky without cheating. Maybe you're just this unlucky. She threw a card at him. He caught it and added it to his hand. That doesn't count, she protested. You threw it to me. Counts in my book. Your book is wrong. My book is the only book we've got. She was trying not to smile. He could see it at the corners of her mouth. Fine. Play it. But when I win the next 3 hands, you're not allowed to complain. Deal. She won the next 4 hands. Elias didn't complain. When the storm finally broke, they emerged into a world transformed. Snow had reshaped everything, drifts creating new geography, icicles hanging from every edge like teeth. The sun was blinding on all that white. We need to check the animals, Mara said, already pulling on boots. The barn was half buried,
This
but the
story was
structure had
posted
held.
on the channel west
Inside,
of
the
Betrayal.
horses and chickens
Please
were
do not
fine,
repost
if
it in
restless
any
from days
form.
of confinement. Elias and Mara worked together to dig out paths, break ice, redistribute hay. This is going to be a hard rest of winter, Elias said, looking at the amount of feed they'd gone through. We'll make it. We always figure it out. Mara scattered grain for the chickens. Might need to supplement with hunting when we can, though. Over the next weeks, they fell into a rhythm of survival. Hunt when weather allowed, preserve what they caught, ration carefully, waste nothing. It was hard work and the days were long, but they faced it together. And slowly, so slowly Elias almost didn't notice it happening, the cabin stopped feeling like his place where Mara was staying. It became their place. Their home. One evening in late February, Mara was teaching him to cook something more complicated than basic stew. No, like this. She guided his hands holding the knife. You're cutting, not hacking. Gentle pressure, smooth motion. Her hands over his were work-roughened and strong. Elias was acutely aware of how close she was standing, the warmth of her beside him. Better? He asked. Better. Now keep that rhythm while I start the sauce. They worked side by side, Mara directing while Elias followed instructions. The result was something that actually tasted complex, layered, intentional. This is good, he said, surprised. Of course it's good. I taught you how to make it. She took another bite. You're actually not a bad cook when you pay attention. Just lazy about it. Lazy? Lazy. You know what you're doing, you just don't bother most of the time. She pointed her fork at him. That changes now. From here on out, we're alternating cooking duties. I teach you properly. You actually learn instead of pretending you can't. Yes, ma'am. Don't ma'am me. Makes me sound old. You're the one giving orders. That's not about age. That's about knowing better than you. But she was smiling. They cleaned up together, falling into the efficient pattern they'd developed over months. Wash, dry, put away. No wasted motion, no unnecessary words. Mara? Yeah? I was wrong. Before. When I said you were taking over. She paused mid-wipe. Go on. You weren't taking over. You were making this place actually livable, turning it from a shelter into a home. He set down the last dish. Thank you for that. Mara looked at him for a long moment. Then she set down her towel and crossed the kitchen to stand directly in front of him. I need to tell you something, and I need you to just listen. Can you do that? Yeah. I came here expecting nothing, planning for nothing, ready to survive alone if this didn't work out. She took a breath. But somewhere along the way, that changed. This place became somewhere I actually want to be. Not just somewhere I can tolerate, somewhere I want. Elias didn't move. And you, she met his eyes. You became someone I trust, someone I respect, someone I look forward to seeing every morning and talking to every night. That's never happened to me before, ever. Mara, I'm not done. Her voice was firm. I don't know what to call this. Don't know where it's going, but I know I don't want to lose it. And I need to know if you feel the same way or if I'm over here building something by myself. The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Elias thought about the last 5 months, about going from alone to partnered, from surviving to living, from empty rooms to a home full of noise and life and argument and laughter. Thought about Mara, stubborn, brilliant, difficult, perfect Mara, and how the cabin felt wrong now when she wasn't in it. I feel the same way, he said quietly. Something in Mara's expression cracked open. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Yeah? Yeah. He took a step closer. I don't know what to call it either, but whatever this is, I want to keep building it. With you. Mara reached out and took his hand. Her grip was strong, calloused, certain. Okay then, she said. We keep building. They stood in the kitchen holding hands while the fire crackled and wind howled outside, and the cabin held them safe and warm. It wasn't a kiss, wasn't some grand romantic gesture, just two people acknowledging what they'd built and deciding to keep building it, but it felt like everything. That night, Elias lay in bed listening to Mara move around upstairs. The same sounds as always, but they meant something different now. This wasn't temporary anymore. Wasn't an experiment or a trial period or a partnership that might dissolve when the next stagecoach came through. This was real. This was lasting. This was home. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Elias Boone fell asleep without wondering if tomorrow would bring another ending. March brought the first real thaw. Ice melted from the eaves in steady drips, snow retreated from the clearing, and patches of brown earth appeared like promises. The world was waking up, and so was something between Elias and Mara that neither of them had quite figured out how to name. They'd held hands exactly once since that conversation in the kitchen. Neither had mentioned it. Neither had repeated it. But something had shifted, a awareness of each other that hadn't been there before, or maybe had always been there and was finally acknowledged. Elias caught himself watching her more, The way she moved through the cabin with absolute confidence. The way she'd push hair out of her face when she was concentrating. The
This
sound of
story
her
was
laugh when
posted on
something
the channel
actually
West
struck
of
her as
Betrayal.
funny, which
Please
was
do not
rare enough to be
repost it
remarkable.
in any form.
And he caught her watching him too, looking away quickly when he noticed, color rising in her cheeks. It was awkward and strange, and neither of them knew what to do about it. "We should talk about the wedding," Mara said one morning over breakfast, apropos of nothing. Elias nearly choked on his coffee. "What wedding?" "Ours, assuming that's where this is heading." She said it matter-of-factly, like discussing crop rotation. "I'm not interested in living in sin or whatever people want to call it. If we're building a life together, we should make it official." "You proposing to me?" "I'm stating facts. We live together. We work together. We've built something that looks a lot like a marriage already, just without the paperwork." She buttered her bread with aggressive efficiency. "So yes, I'm proposing we make it legal before gossip starts that we can't undo." It was possibly the least romantic proposal in history. Elias loved everything about it. "All right." Mara looked up sharply. "All right? That's your answer? You want me to argue with you about marrying you? I want you to have an actual opinion about it." Elias set down his cup and looked at her directly. "My opinion is yes. I want to marry you. Not because of gossip or propriety or any other reason except that you're right. We've already built a life together. Might as well acknowledge it properly." "That's it? No hesitation? Should there be? Most people hesitate before committing to forever with someone as difficult as me." "You are difficult, but so am I. We match." He picked up his coffee again. "When do you want to do it?" Mara blinked, clearly thrown by how easily he'd agreed. "Soon, before the trail gets too busy and people start wondering. There's a circuit preacher who comes through the valley every few months. We can catch him next time he's at the trading post. Works for me. Just like that. Just like that." She stared at him for a long moment, something complicated working across her face. Then she stood up, walked around the table, and kissed him. It wasn't graceful. Their noses bumped and she had to bend down because he was still sitting. But it was real and warm and tasted like coffee and certainty. When she pulled back, Elias was smiling. "What?" Mara demanded. "Nothing, just, you surprise me." "Good. Keep you on your toes." But she was smiling too. "We're really doing this." "Yeah, we are." They rode down to the trading post the following week. Jed Cooper's eyes went wide when Elias asked about the preacher's schedule. "You're getting married? That a problem?" No, just, well, after the last 5, Jed caught himself. "That is, congratulations, both of you." "When's the preacher due?" Mara asked, cutting through the awkwardness. "Next Sunday. Holds services in the back room here." Jed was grinning now. "I'll make sure he knows to expect you." Word spread fast. By the time they left the trading post with their supplies, half the valley knew Elias Boone was finally getting married. "They're going to show up, you know," Mara said on the ride back up. "Everyone who's heard about the 5 brides who left. They'll come to gawk. Let them." "Doesn't bother you?" "Used to. Now I just don't care what they think." He glanced at her. "You bothered?" "I stopped caring what people thought about me years ago, but I reserve the right to be rude if anyone says something stupid." "Wouldn't expect anything less." Sunday came bright and clear. They rode down together, Mara wearing the one good
This
dress
story
she
was
owned,
posted on
and
the
Elias
channel
in the
West
clean
of
work
Betrayal.
clothes that were the closest
Please do
thing
not
he had to
repost
formal
it
wear.
in any form.
The trading post was packed. Jed hadn't been kidding. It seemed like everyone within 20 miles had found a reason to be there. The preacher was a thin man in his 60s named Reverend Walsh. He looked at Elias and Mara with open curiosity but no judgment. "No, you're sure about this?" he asked quietly before they started. "Completely," Mara said. "Then let's begin." The ceremony was short and practical, which suited them both fine. No flowery language or lengthy sermons, just the essential vows and the legal necessities. When Reverend Walsh asked if anyone objected, someone in the back coughed. Mara turned and glared. No one said a word. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Elias kissed his wife for the second time ever. She kissed him back with enthusiasm that made a few people in the crowd gasp. They signed the papers, made it legal, and received congratulations from people who mostly seemed shocked it had actually happened. Mrs. Patterson, their nearest neighbor, pulled Mara aside. "You're braver than the others, I'll give you that." Not brave, just matched. Mara looked over at Elias, who was enduring handshakes from men who'd probably bet against this happening. "We fit, that's all." "Well, I hope it works out for you both." It already has. The ride back up the mountain felt different. Married now, legally bound, partners not just in practice but in law. "That went better than expected," Elias said. "You were expecting it to go badly." "Was expecting someone to object, honestly. Would have been funny if they had. Watching you decide whether to be polite or protective." Mara adjusted her seat in the saddle. "What would you have done? Told them to mind their own business and married you anyway." Good answer. At the cabin, they put the horses away and went inside. Everything was exactly as they'd left it, except now they were married, and neither quite knew what that meant for the rest of the day. "I should start dinner," Mara said. "I should check the fence line." They stood in the kitchen, suddenly awkward. "This is stupid," Mara said finally. "We've lived together for 6 months. Nothing's different just because we signed papers." "Everything's different because we signed papers. Only if we let it be." She crossed the kitchen and took his hands. "We're the same people we were yesterday. We work the same way. We argue the same way. We figure things out the same way. The only difference is now it's official." "You're right. I know I'm right." She squeezed his hands. "Now go check your fence line. I'll make dinner. We'll eat and argue about something pointless, and then sit on the porch like we always do. Normal." "Normal," Elias agreed. Except that night when they went upstairs, Mara didn't go to her room. She stood at Elias's door instead. "Can I come in?" "Yeah." She did, closing the door behind her. Stood in the middle of his room, looking uncertain in a way he'd never seen before. "I don't really know how this works," she admitted. "The marriage part, the being together part. I've never... That is, I have, but it was..." She stopped, frustrated with herself. "I'm bad at this." "At what?" "At being vulnerable. At admitting I don't know something. At asking for what I want without demanding it." Elias crossed the room to stand in front of her. "What do you want?" "I want to stop sleeping in separate rooms like we're strangers. I want to wake up next to someone who isn't going to judge me for snoring or taking up too much space." She met his eyes. "I want to actually be married, not just legally married. Then stay. Just like that?" "Just like that." She smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "You make things simple. You make things complicated. We balance." That night, for the first time, they fell asleep in the same bed. It wasn't perfect. Mara did snore, and Elias ran hot as a furnace, and they had to negotiate who got which side and how many blankets were too many. But it was real, and theirs, and right. Spring came in earnest after that. The world turned green, trails opened up, and work shifted from survival to growth. They planted the expanded fields Mara had planned, built new chicken coops, repaired winter damage, and added a room onto the cabin for storage. Every decision was made together now. Every plan discussed and argued and refined until they both agreed. It wasn't always smooth. They still fought about how to do things, still had moments of frustration when their stubborn natures collided. But they never fought about whether they wanted to be there. That was settled. In June, Mara missed her monthly bleeding. She didn't tell Elias right away. Waited another month to be sure. When she missed the second time and started waking up nauseous, she finally said something. "I think I'm pregnant." They were in the garden, weeding between rows of beans. Elias sat back on his heels, processing. "You think, or you know?" "No, pretty much no." She pulled another weed with unnecessary force. "I've missed twice and I'm sick every morning. Unless I've suddenly developed a taste for feeling awful, this is what it is." "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified, excited, angry that I'm terrified." She threw the weed aside. "I never thought I'd have this. Gave up on it years ago, and now that it's happening, I don't know what to do with it." Elias moved to sit beside her. "We'll figure it out, same as everything else." "A baby isn't everything else. A baby is..." She gestured helplessly. "A whole person. Who'll depend on us to not ruin them? So we don't ruin them. You're making this sound simple again. It is simple, not easy, but simple. He took her hand. We wanted this place to be big enough for a family. Now we're going to have one. Scary as hell, but also exactly what we built this for. Mara leaned against his shoulder. What if I'm a terrible mother? What if I'm too harsh or too loud or too... You'll be exactly who you are. That's what this kid needs. He wrapped an arm around her. Someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space. Someone who's strong and competent and doesn't back down. You think that's a bad example? I think the world's going to tell our kid they're too much. Then we teach them the world's wrong. He pulled her closer. We teach them what we learned. That being too much just means you haven't found the right place yet. And when you do find it, you hold on and you build something real. Mara was quiet for a long moment. You're going to be an insufferably confident father, aren't you? Probably. Good. I'll be an insufferably demanding mother. The kid won't stand a chance. They sat in the garden, surrounded by growing things, and laughed at their own fear and certainty. The pregnancy was hard. Mara hated being sick, hated how tired she got, hated that her body was doing things she couldn't control. But she attacked it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, reading every book she could find on childbirth and infant care, preparing obsessively, making lists and plans and contingencies. Elias watched her transform the smallest bedroom into a nursery with the same intensity she'd organized the root cellar. Everything had to be perfect, functional, ready. You know babies don't care if the furniture matches, he said one evening, watching her rearrange the cradle for the third time. I care. This child is going to know from day one that they're wanted and planned for and expected. She adjusted the angle slightly. They're not going to wonder if they belong, not ever. Elias understood then. This wasn't about the furniture. It was about creating the childhood neither of them had, one where being themselves was enough, where there was always room, where no one had to shrink. Mrs. Patterson came up the mountain in September, offering to help when the time came. She was a grandmother 5 times over and had midwifed half the births in the valley. You'll want an experienced hand, she told Mara. First babies are unpredictable. How unpredictable? Could be fast, could be slow, could be easy, could be hard. No way to know until you're in it. Mrs. Patterson examined the preparations Mara had made. But you're ready as anyone can be. That counts for something. The baby came in late October, on a cold morning when frost covered everything in white. Mara's water broke at dawn. By noon, she was in hard labor, and by evening, she was cursing Elias's name between contractions. Never again, she growled. Never doing this again, you hear me? I hear you. This is your fault. I know. If you say I'm doing great, I'll hit you. Elias wisely kept his mouth shut. Mrs. Patterson worked efficiently, coaching Mara through contractions, checking progress, staying calm even when Mara was anything but. Almost there. One more big push. I can't. You can. You're the strongest woman I've ever met. You can do this. Mara pushed, screamed, pushed again, and then a different kind of crying, high and indignant and alive. It's a girl, Mrs. Patterson announced, placing a squirming, screaming bundle on Mara's chest. Healthy lungs on this one. Mara looked down at the tiny person covered in vernix and blood and immediately started crying. She's so small. She's perfect, Elias said, staring at his daughter with something like awe. The
This
baby
story
had
was
Mara's dark
posted
hair
on the
and a
channel
furious
west of
red
Betrayal.
face.
Please do
Her
not
hands were clenched
repost
into
it in any
fists, and she
form.
was hollering like someone had personally offended her by making her be born. She's got your temper, Elias said. Good. She'll need it. Mara touched the baby's face with one finger. Hello, little one. Welcome to the mountain. They named her Sarah, after Mara's mother. Sarah Boone, born on a mountain to parents who'd been told they were too much for the world and had built their own world instead. The first weeks were brutal. Sarah cried constantly, slept in random intervals, and demanded attention with the same fierce intensity her mother brought to everything. Mara and Elias took turns walking her, feeding her, changing her, falling into bed exhausted whenever she finally slept. This is impossible, Mara said one night, eyes red from lack of sleep. We'll figure it out. You keep saying that. Keep being true. And slowly, impossibly, they did figure it out. Found rhythms that worked. Learned to read Sarah's different cries. Divided duties in ways that let both of them sleep in shifts. Adjusted their work schedule around a tiny dictator who cared nothing for convenience. By spring, Sarah had grown into a fat, happy baby who smiled at everything and everyone. She had Elias's eyes and Mara's stubborn chin and lungs that could project across the entire valley when she wanted attention. "She's perfect," Mara said one evening, watching Sarah grab at her toes and gurgle with concentration. "She's loud. She's supposed to be loud. She's ours." Elias couldn't argue with that. Word of the baby spread through the valley. People started showing up with gifts, hand-knitted blankets, wooden toys, jars of preserved food. Mrs. Patterson came up regularly to check on Sarah and offer advice Mara mostly ignored. "You're doing fine," she told Mara during one visit. "Better than fine, actually. That's a healthy, happy child." "She cries a lot." "All babies cry. But look at her. She's thriving, growing like a weed. That's because of you two." Mrs. Patterson glanced around the cabin. "You've built something good up here, something real." After she left, Mara turned to Elias. "Do you think people still talk about us? About how strange we are?" "Probably." "Does it bother you?" "No, let them talk. We're too busy living to care." The years that followed proved him right. They were too busy to care what anyone else thought. Too busy expanding the farm, teaching Sarah to walk and talk, building a life that grew larger every season. Sarah turned into a wild child who climbed everything, feared nothing, and asked constant questions in a voice that carried across the mountain. She was big for her age, strong and confident, exactly like her mother. When she was 4, she came home from a rare trip to the valley in tears. "What happened?" Mara asked, kneeling down. "A boy said I was too big. Said girls aren't supposed to be big like me." Mara looked at Elias, then back at Sarah. "You know what I think about that?" Sarah shook her head. "I think that boy's never seen what big can do. Never seen how strong and capable and amazing big can be." She picked Sarah up easily. "You're not too big. You're exactly the right size for everything you need to do. And anyone who says different is just scared because they're smaller." "Really?" "Really. Your father and I, we spent our whole lives being told we were too much, too big, too loud, too different. And then we found each other in this mountain, and we built a place where too much is just right." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I don't want to be small." "Good. Because you're not. You're big and strong and loud and wonderful, and you never have to apologize for any of it." Elias watched his wife comfort their daughter and felt something settle in his chest. This was what they'd built, not just a cabin or a farm or a life, but a place where being yourself was not just allowed but celebrated, where too much was never a criticism, where people who didn't fit anywhere else could finally fit perfectly. By the time Sarah was 10, the cabin had expanded twice more. The farm produced enough to sell surplus at the trading post. Their small family had become a known quantity in the valley. The mountain couple and their wild daughter, strange but undeniably successful. People stopped whispering and started asking for advice. How did they make the mountain work for them? How did they survive the winters? How did they build something so clearly functional when conventional wisdom said it couldn't be done? Elias and Mara shared what they knew, helped where they could, but mostly kept to themselves. They'd built this life for themselves, not for approval or recognition. One evening, when Sarah was asleep and the summer air was warm, Elias and Mara sat on the porch. The same porch where Elias had once sat alone, watching brides disappear down the mountain. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Mara asked. "Sometimes. If you hadn't written that letter. If I'd given up after the 5th one left. But you didn't. But I didn't." He took her hand, rough and calloused from years of work. "Best decision I ever made, not giving up. Best decision I ever made was coming when you said, 'Come.'" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "No pretty words, no promises, just truth. That's what I needed." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the valley. Below them, the trading post lights were starting to glow. Above them, stars were beginning to emerge. "Sarah asked me today if we were ever going to move down to the valley," Mara said. "What'd you tell her?" "Told her the valley's too small for people like us. We need the mountain, need the space, need room to be as big as we actually are without apologizing. She understand? Think so. She's starting to figure out she's built like us, different from other kids, bigger, louder, more. Mara smiled. But she's not scared of it, that's the difference. We taught her not to be. We taught her what we had to learn the hard way, that different isn't wrong, it's just different. Elias thought about that, about the journey from a mining town in Pennsylvania to this mountain, about 5 failed attempts at finding a partner, about one stubborn woman who wrote a letter that changed everything. You know what I think, he said. What? I think we were never too much. The world was just too small. Mara lifted her head to look at him. That's the smartest thing you've ever said. I have my moments. Rare ones. But she was smiling. Come on, let's go to bed. Tomorrow we're starting on that new barn Sarah's been asking for. She's 10. She doesn't need her own barn. She's getting one anyway. Kid wants to raise horses. Who are we to say no? We're her parents. Saying no is half the job. The other half is saying yes to the things that matter. This matters to her. Mara stood and pulled him up. Besides, we've got the space. Might as well use it. They went inside, the cabin warm and full of life. Sarah was asleep upstairs, dreaming whatever wild dreams filled the head of a 10-year-old who'd never been told she was too much. In the bedroom they now shared without thought or awkwardness, Mara and Elias got ready for bed. The same routine they'd followed for years now, comfortable and familiar and theirs. You happy? Mara asked in the darkness. Yeah. You? More than I ever thought I'd be. A pause. You know what the best part is? What? I don't have to wonder anymore if I belong somewhere. I know I do. Here. With you. With Sarah. On this mountain that's big enough for all of us. Same, Elias said quietly. Exactly the same. They fell asleep together, the way they had for years now. Two people who'd been told all their lives they were too much, finally finding a place where too much was exactly right. Outside, the mountain stood solid and unchanging. Inside, the cabin held a family that proved something important, that the world wasn't too small for people like them. The world had plenty of space. They just had to find the right piece of it, claim it, and build something extraordinary enough to fill it. And they had.